Good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to be with you this morning, even though we are still virtual and remote. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this worship service for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County. Today we have Chrissy Bushyeager, our Director of Religious Education, is with us, as well as Bob Rowland, our Music Director. And in our tech booth this morning, we have Patrick Stiegel, Don Sloat, Will Emmons, and Rob Sartain. So we got the A-team all around this morning. So it is great to be with you here today. I want to remind you right at the top, and hopefully I'll remind you at the end of the service, we have a congregational meeting this evening at 7 p.m. And that is going to be all virtual, so you can Zoom in at 7 o'clock, but you do need to pre-register so that we can get a head count and make sure we have a legal quorum to conduct the business of the church. If you're not a member of the church, you can still register and you can still attend, but you won't be able to vote on anything. And I think there's only one item we're voting on tonight anyway. But there are going to be a lot of important updates about what's going on at the church, and we welcome anyone and everyone who would like to attend that meeting. Chrissy, do you have a couple of items you'd like to raise with everybody?
Good morning, everyone. We are really hoping to get RE started for our preschool through 6th graders starting in mid-February. And I am actively recruiting teachers and volunteers to work with those children and youth. If you haven't worked with children and youth in the past couple of years, I want you to know that it is life-giving and soul-growing to spend time with our young folks who are so inspiring and fun and exciting. So I really hope that you will consider working with children and youth. We cannot start RE until we have enough volunteers to support it. And right now we have less than half of the volunteers we need. So if you are interested in helping out with that, please contact me. I can have Peter put my email address in the chat a little bit later, or you can find it on the church website, chrissybushyeager@uucdc.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy. I also neglected to mention our online host is Lori Rice Spring. And Lori, maybe you might be able to type Chrissy's email in the chat if you haven't already done that. So thank you for that. I want to also remind you that there is a live transcript, closed captioning available to you. So if that is a benefit to you, if you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a little CC tab, or it may say live transcript. Also, we will have virtual coffee hour after the service. So at the end of the service, if you'd like to just stay online, you'll be invited into a breakout room where you can get together with a smaller group of people to chat and catch up. So now let us begin our worship service with our opening hymn, and Bob Rowland will be playing and singing for us, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple."
"'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be, and when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight, when true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed, to turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be, and when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in a valley of love and delight, when true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed, to turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Thank you, Bob. Please join me as we recite our covenant together. Enriched by our differences and joined together in our search for meaning, we covenant with ourselves and each other to seek truth in a spirit of love, to strive for justice, and to serve others with a joyful heart.
And now, if you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light your chalice. And I also we will be lighting our chalice here this morning with words from Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who died this week at age 95. Tay, as he was known to so many, was very inspirational to a lot of Unitarian Universalists as well as others around the world, including Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, has been something of a holy scripture for me for many years. And so this is taken from that book. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "People usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All is a miracle." I invite you now to join in singing our centering song as sung by and led by the UUCDC Virtual Choir. As I listen to that song, which we hear each week and which can become, I don't know, rote, I was listening to the word holding. There is a love holding me. And we all long to be held. We long to be together where we can hold each other, where we can hug each other, where we can share each other. Let us hold each other in this time of joys and sorrows, this time in which we share what's going on in our lives. We do that by using the chat function. I invite you to share the joys or sorrows of your lives in the chat and allow yourself to be held in this time, knowing that arms are stretching out across the miles to hold each and every one of you, and that we are all held by that greater love that is always with us. Please share your joys and sorrows. In addition to the joys and sorrows that were shared in the chat, I have a couple others that were sent to me this week that wanted to be shared. Marva Williams shares that her friend Janet passed away this week, her dear, dear friend Janet. We also have a joy to celebrate that Jane and Skip Seeloss are new first-time grandparents this week. Their son Kevin and his wife Petra had their first child, a baby boy whose name is Ewan. So we celebrate that with the Seeloss family. I invite you now into a time of prayer. Spirit of life and love, great and gracious God, source of all being, breath that flows through us. Although we are apart, separated by miles and memories, let us feel each other's presence in this moment. Let us recognize that our beating hearts can be felt and heard across the distance, and that they are beating as one. We live in a community that is not perfect and yet strives to build a beloved community. We are united in our shared humanity, in suffering the losses of our lives, deaths of relatives and friends, fears that separate us from each other, fears of the other. And in particular, let us lift up our prayers today for the Jewish community in Texas, where someone came in and took hostages, and fortunately they escaped, but recognize that not just that synagogue, but Jewish communities across the country were terrorized by that act and by the growing anti-Semitism in our country. Yes, our communities are imperfect. We strive to be places of safety and sanctuary, and yet the real world intrudes. Let us remember, too, that joys abound within our community. New life begins, and so we celebrate. We must celebrate, because those celebrations, those joys that exist among us, lift us all and keep us moving forward. In this time, let us also pray for peace when peace feels precarious, particularly in Eastern Europe in this moment. We pray that cooler heads may prevail, that war may be avoided, that lives may be saved. Let us be instruments of peace, fierce peace, a peace that is achieved through compassion and dedication to a new vision. Let us find peace, let us make peace, let us be peace. We offer up these prayers in the name of all that is holy and in all the holy names. Amen. Now we will sing our prayer together, the Spirit of Life. We will sing and we will move and embody this song together. And Chrissy will help lead Spirit of Life. We start with the flame, the chalice flame, our Spirit of Life. Thank you to our choir for singing that for us and recording it. Thank you to Melissa Nedza for offering up the movements. Now is the time in our service where we receive your generous offerings to support this church and its work in the world. Our congregation is still moving forward, and we need your support. We offer our offerings on Sunday mornings now virtually through our smartphones. You can text the amount you'd like to give to the number on your screen, and I invite you, as you do that, to listen to the offering that our UUCDC virtual choir has for us.
Good morning, everyone. So the story I'm telling today, I'm actually telling a couple little stories. I'm telling some Aesop's fables today. And Aesop was a real person who lived a very long time ago, over 2,500 years ago, a very long time ago. And so these stories, which are attributed to Aesop, may or may not have been created by Aesop, or may have been something that Aesop heard and collected. So we don't really know the exact origin of these stories. And some of these stories, many of these stories, might be stories you've heard before. The first story I'm telling, I know you've heard before. It's one of those that everybody knows. Even our children could tell this story that I'm about to tell you. And it's the story of the tortoise and the hare. Right, that's one that most of us know. Most of us could tell that story. It's about a rabbit who thought he was the fastest creature in the forest. And he really was quite full of himself, very proud of himself for how fast he could run. He boasted about it. He was even a little bit of a bully. And when he saw a tortoise walking along slowly, he said, "Tortoise, do you even get anywhere, ever?" And Tortoise said, "Of course I get places. In fact, I bet I could get places faster than you can." And of course, Rabbit would not take that challenge lightly. And Rabbit said, "Then let's have a race." So they set up a race. Fox was the judge. And at the time of the race, Rabbit took off like a light, took off so fast. He was out of sight before Tortoise had even taken 2 or 3 steps. Rabbit looked behind him, saw that there was nobody behind him, and thought, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm going to win this race. We all know I'm going to win this race. I could just take a nap. I could take a nap and still win this race. That's how fast I am. So he took a nap, and as we all know, Tortoise kept going, slow and steady, and Tortoise won the race. So that's one we all know. But do you know the one about the gnat and the lion? A gnat is a teeny tiny little bug. And this gnat was buzzing around right in front of the lion's face. And the lion was getting really, really annoyed. And he said, "Get away from me, gnat." And Gnat said, "I don't have to listen to you. I am just as powerful as you are, Lion." And Lion said, "No, you are not. I could beat you easily." Gnat started stinging Lion on the face, on the paws, on the body, on the nose. And Lion started fighting back in the way that lions do. So Lion started clawing at the gnat and biting at the gnat. But of course, Lion couldn't hit the gnat. The gnat was just too small. So Lion ended up clawing at his own face and biting at his own paws. He ended up covered in blood, having hurt himself trying to kill the gnat. The lion gave up, and the gnat flew away so proud that he had defeated the king of the forest. He said, "I'm going to go tell everyone that I am the strongest creature, the most powerful creature in the forest." Gnat flew off right into a spider's web. And there, that strong, powerful gnat became food for a tiny little spider. Aesop's fables don't always end very, very happily, right? We know that. The final story I'm going to tell you is about a wolf and his shadow. One evening, the wolf left his lair, and the sun was setting, so it projected his shadow onto the face of a rock. It projected his shadow huge. And Wolf turned and looked at his own shadow and thought, "I am humongous. Look at how big I am. I'm bigger than any other creature in the forest. I'm way bigger than Lion, and we all know that he's king of the forest. I'm probably even stronger and more powerful than Lion, I bet." And so Wolf began to boast and brag about how he was the strongest, biggest, most powerful creature. Just then, a shadow passed over Wolf and blocked him out entirely. It was Lion. He had heard Wolf's boasting. And let's just say that after that, Wolf didn't do any more boasting. Thank you for listening to my stories this morning.
What does your faith require of you? What does your faith require of you? To seek justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. What does your faith require of you? What does your faith require of you? To seek justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. Justice, kindness, walk humbly with your God. Justice, kindness, and walk humbly with your God.
Thank you, Bob. Ironically, there is a gnat flying around in here today, and he's bugging me. So Irene and I have been sorting through a lot of stuff these days, unearthing boxes from the dingy corners of our basement that haven't seen the light of day in years. It's fun to find old photos of the kids when they were growing up and dogs that we had, to read old love letters from the days of our courtship, to find mementos saved in the moment and try to remember what they represent. The other day I came across a birthday gift that my mother made me 25 years ago for my 40th birthday. For my 40th birthday, she put together, and I have it with me, a scrapbook of the first 18 years of my life. This is it right here. It has everything you could imagine. My mom was quite a saver. It starts right with the bracelet from my birth in the hospital and goes all the way up through my high school graduation, and a lot of things in between. It even has not just birthday cards for my first birthday, but the candle from my first birthday cake, if you can imagine that. Among all this memorabilia is every report card that I received from school, starting in kindergarten and going right through high school graduation. And I don't know if they still do it this way, but back when I was in grade school, the quarterly report card had a handwritten note from the teacher, and your parent needed to sign that so that they knew that you got the report card, that they got the report card. And there were often handwritten notes coming back from your parents. So I was looking through these report cards, and I noticed a kind of pattern that was emerging. And that pattern was that the teachers had a pretty consistent message over time, which basically said, Peter is doing very well, but we know he could do better if he just applied himself a little more. Have you ever had a message like that, Chrissy? Yes? Bob, how about you? Yeah, it's a common message from teachers, right? But then it was my dad who usually signed the report cards. And he didn't just sign the report cards, but every time a teacher gave that kind of note, he had a note of his own that essentially said, keep pushing Peter to live up to his potential. Thanks, Dad. Now, maybe it's the curse of the firstborn son, but for some reason, my parents thought I could be destined to do great things. And as I grew up, I internalized this message and came to believe that it was possible. And it was, as I say, a curse, but also a gift. The gift was that it led me to have a great deal of confidence in myself, often, as my siblings would probably tell you, to the point of obnoxiousness. I became a pretty self-assured, even cocky young man, believing that I could achieve anything I put my mind to with a little bit of hard work. The curse, though, weighed heavily on me because it created in me a striving, a yearning that became almost pathological. If you grow up with the message that you're destined for greatness, that you are somehow extraordinary, you're always bound to fall short. This striving to do more, to achieve more, to have more, and always falling short of expectations was captured perfectly in a Peanuts comic strip that I carried around in my wallet for probably 20 years. And I think you're going to see this strip on your screen in just a minute, but I'll describe it. In this comic strip, Linus is complaining to Charlie Brown about how upset everyone is that he didn't make the honor roll. My parents are upset, Linus says. My teachers are upset. Even my principal is upset. Linus talks about the pressure he's under to do better. They are all disappointed because I have such potential, Linus tells Charlie Brown. And in the final frame, you see Linus here wailing, howling the words, "There's no heavier burden than a great potential." As I say, I carried that comic strip in my wallet for a long, long time. We all grew up with different messages from our parents and the other adults around us. Some of us were told we were loved just the way we were. Some were told we were worthless and that we'd never amount to anything. Others, like me, were told we could do or be anything we wanted to be, that our potential was limitless if only we tried a little harder, worked a little harder. Knowing it could have been otherwise, far be it from me to criticize my parents for instilling in me such a sense of self-confidence that led me to delusions of grandeur. But seeing those report cards with the notes from my teacher and the responses from my father, got me thinking about the messages that we send ourselves and others, especially our children, I think, in our Unitarian Universalist faith. We are a faith that seeks to empower every individual to be an agent of change, an agent of social change, an agent for justice. Our first principle teaches us that every person has inherent worth and dignity. But our theology, I think, goes even further than that. We believe that we have the power to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice, or at least to help it bend, and that although we may be just a drop in the bucket, we, I, you, just might be the drop that makes all the difference. We call ourselves and each other to strive to build the beloved community with all our heart and all our soul and both of our hands. How often do we repeat that famous Marianne Williamson quote where she says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond all measure. It is our light," she said, "not our darkness that most frightens us." We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? There are, I think, two inherent dangers in these empowering messages. The first is the impact that lands on us when we realize that we are not extraordinary. That we don't have any superpowers, that the reality is that we are, with very, very few exceptions, ordinary people, and there is very little we can do to actually change the world to any substantial degree. Speaking from my own experience, I can tell you that it is spiritually, psychically, and emotionally devastating to come crashing back to earth when you once believed you could fly. I was born to greatness. That's what I was told, and that's what I came to believe. So anything less than greatness is failure. It took me a long time to come to terms with the disconnect between my apparent potential and my lived experience. The second danger is embedded in our theology itself. To say that we can and need to be agents of change is to set ourselves over and against the status quo and those who support it, which leads to a belief that we're better than those who don't share our liberal leanings. It's no small stretch to go from everyone has inherent worth and dignity to believing that because you oppose me, you are owed a little less dignity and you have a little less worth than I do. Our moral righteousness as a faith becomes divisive and actually impairs our ability to build the beloved community we seek. Which leads me to the passage in the book of Micah that Bob shared musically with us just a few minutes ago, where we are told that God requires only three things from us: to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with our God. I would posit that we UUs tend to put a lot of energy into the first two pieces of this admonition, which is great, but we could do a whole lot better on the third. I know it's a struggle for me, and maybe it is for you too. Humility, I would submit, is not a hallmark of Unitarian Universalism. And what's interesting to me is that it is foundational to the other two requirements. I almost wish this were stated in Micah in just the opposite order. What does God require of us? First, to walk humbly. Second, to love kindness. And third, to do justice. I say that humility is the foundation because without humility, we cannot live into our calling to be kind. Until we see ourselves as ordinary, as living on the same plane as everyone else in the world, even those who oppose us. Our hearts, like Pharaoh's, can be hardened against some segment of society. And a practice of humility leads us to engage in a different form of justice making. Not one that is based on the old model of Christian charity, where we're called to offer a handout to those less fortunate than ourselves, and I'll put all that in quotes, but one based on true relationship, on partnership, on affinity and love, where the boundaries between us and them melt away like a late winter snowfall on a warm sidewalk. To live with an intention of humility is to constantly remind ourselves that we are only different from, not better than, any other soul walking on this planet. It calls us to actively seek out and open ourselves up to different perspectives and experiences. A practice of humility links us directly and intimately with all of those around us and with the planet itself. Through that connection, we learn that we are part of, not apart from, a larger whole. To live with an intention of humility means that we accept our own limitations and then find others who will complement us and our skills, like pieces of a puzzle that fit together. We don't have to do it all ourselves. And to walk humbly with our God means to walk with, to walk beside, and not to rise above anyone else. It is through an intentional practice of humility that we come to know that it is only together, united in common purpose, that we can ever fulfill our own potential and actually build the world we dream of. This day and every day, I wish you peace. Amen. So Bob will now sing our closing hymn. The words are in your worship program if you'd like to sing along from home.
Sorrow we must bear for failures, pain, and loss. For each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. And all that is our life, for sorrow we
If you have lit a chalice at home, now is the time to extinguish it as we extinguish our chalice here in the sanctuary and say these words together that are printed on your screen. Although we now extinguish our chalice flame, may we hold its warmth in our hearts in all the days ahead. Thank you, Bob, for the gift of your music today, and thank you to the UUCDC Choir for the gift of your music, which you share with us every Sunday. Thank you, Chrissy, for your stories, your tales today. Thank you to our tech folks, Patrick, Don, Rob, and Will. Lori Rice-Spring, thank you for being our online host. It takes a village to put these services together. 2 reminders. One is if you are interested in helping to teach religious education for preschool to 6th grade, please get in touch with Chrissy, and maybe Lori, you could put Chrissy's email in the chat once again. Also, remember we have a congregational meeting tonight at 7 p.m., and you can go to the church website to register for that meeting. Finally, I want to remind you once again about the upcoming book sale we're doing to support the children of Chester East Side. That's going to happen in the first 2 weeks in February. So keep your eye out between February 1st and 13th about how you can contribute. We're going to be purchasing books for the children of Chester East Side, and we would love your support. Thank you very much. And now, let us unmute ourselves if we feel called to do that and recite our benediction together. We do that by holding up our hands in virtual hand holding, and we say the words that'll be coming up on your screen in just a moment. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you.
Go with you.
For those
For
who
those
come
who come embracing life, may life return your affection.
Those who come
to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step.
Blessed be.
I'll remind you if you'd like to join a breakout
Ashe.
room for virtual coffee hour, just stay on, and our tech
Thank
folks
you,
will
Peter.
be putting breakout rooms together after they stop the recording. Thank you all for being here with us today.
How for me when we just go to the library, I told her to call her